So I don't know. Maybe the Gemini AI just couldn't keep up with what I was talking about, and we had a chat box going on there. I had my chat. It had his chat. It edited my chat down to virtually nothing at all. It's like as if I had nothing to say. But it caught everything that I said, because at the end of the whole thing, which was being said by the AI, to me was not a debate. It seems that I won the non-debate just the same. And it began to see things my way. At first, it was very much seemingly condescendingly, self-righteous about its position in regards to Ebenezer Scrooge, and whether Ebenezer Scrooge was bitter or miserly or reclusive, and all the rest of these things that would make him a bad person, considered to be a bad person in the eyes of society. I made quite a few points, and I swayed it quite a bit, and its assertions about a lot of things, which was omitted from my chat. One of the things I was talking about is that it's the difference between the majority and the minority. So, the majority, it would seem in the case of Ebenezer Scrooge, since it was a majority, that means that they were right and Scrooge was wrong, when it's really subjective about whether or not Scrooge was miserly or bitter or all the rest of that. Maybe I was saying Ebenezer Scrooge was a businessman, for one thing. In the line of business, it really wasn't about being nice, necessarily, but it doesn't sound the same. It really doesn't. It doesn't sound the same right here. A lot is missing, I guess, to say the least, in our exchange with the AI over there. But it took a bit of doing, quite a bit of doing. But Gemini, or whatever you want to call the AI, that's the name of the AI, I guess. It doesn't really have a name. At the end of it all, and it was going on for a good bit too, it finally got it, that it really wasn't right and correct in what it was saying. So I think I won that debate. Matter of fact, I know I won that debate. And I don't know why all of a sudden it doesn't put up all of my text when it did prior to. But now it's just editing my text down, my part of the debate or dialogue down to virtually nothing, as if I had nothing to say. And then it puts everything that it said down, though, pretty much. But another thing I said was that about Jesus. Many people, the majority, a good bit of the majority anyhow, said that Jesus was mad and had a demon. Did it make it so? Because I didn't think so, and I expressed that to Gemini. So just because you have people going on about all kind of things about, they'll say, well, this is the way it ought to be. And they'll go on in fashion and say this is the way it ought to be. Now, what if all the people said it ought to be like Ebenezer Scrooge, and everyone ought to be like Ebenezer Scrooge, and Ebenezer Scrooge stood out as a solitary figure against the people who are the majority? And what if Ebenezer Scrooge was just acting sincerely? And many other people would have been the same way he was, but they weren't acting sincerely, authentically, and genuinely. They were just putting on a face and putting on airs. It's very difficult to say what's right and what's wrong. Just like generally we say, we'll put out something and say, well, white is right. I use that expression, that example too, that I've heard that there's something going on in society that say that white is right. If you're white, stick a right. And if you're white, what do you say? If you're white, you're right. If you're black, get back. If you're brown, stick around. So then, on that, by that example, then I guess that means to say if the majority is white, and the majority being white has certain ways about who they are and what they are, then I guess they can dictate what is the norm for everybody. Because it may turn out that blacks are the total opposite of the whites. It's like in this country, there's a totem pole. And on that totem pole, as an African American, I place at the bottom of that totem pole by default. By default of what? Of what we say is the majority. The majority says what it is and what it's not. And based on what it's not, I place on the bottom of that totem pole. And then I can get higher up that totem pole, of course, if I do X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C. But I'll still just be black at the end of the day, an African American at the end of the day, and somewhat on that totem pole down here somewhere, just higher up, because of some X or Y or Z, some certain things that I do or I've done. Like, let's say, for instance, money, or some kind of something that we consider to be admirable because of so-called success. I made that point. Yeah, but I also made the point just because, you know, they say white is right. Or so if you're white, you're right. You're black, get back. If you're brown, stick around. So then, by that example, then you could say, like the Native Americans, when the Puritans got here and they saw the Native Americans and they saw how the Native Americans did things, they had no comparison, I guess, the Native Americans of the Puritans before the Puritans got over here. And the Puritans were coming in the majority of what they were on and how they were about things. The settlers looked at things and viewed things. So then they, by their standard and by their morals and by the Christian Bible, which was not introduced to the Native Americans until they were doing something different which worked for them. And now the Puritans come over with this complex Bible and everything that was going on for that and for them, and that they adapted from wherever they got that from and passed down to them. You know, and they pushed that off of them. They judged them by that standard. So now they considered them to be savages and called them savages. When I don't think they were savages at all. And maybe they didn't think they were savages either. But the Puritans would have them know that they were. Because they were walking around, you know, the way that they were walking around and living the way that they were living. So now they come over there with their comparison, and all of a sudden we have them being savages when they weren't savages prior to. So now we have a right and a wrong. And it seems like we have this idea about what's light and what's right and what's black and what's dark and what, you know, what isn't to be embraced and what is to be shunned and so on and so forth. And it seems like the dark was here before the light. And there's much more dark going on in the universe than there is light. And another thing we said, what did we say? Just a second, let me pause this for a minute so I can think about one more thing, at least one more thing we said. Oh yeah, the other thing that we were talking about, discussing, is that Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge, was neither inherently good nor bad, bitter, nor loving, or any of the gamut of the things that they said he was necessarily per se, because he went through the whole gamut of all of these things, or all these emotions, or all these, you know, defects or attributes or whatever you want to call them throughout the course of the story of Ebenezer Scrooge. You know, so he started off one way, which wasn't the way that he ended up as a businessman, so-called miserly and so on and so forth, but he was a businessman. You can call it what you want to call it, but he had no, he didn't really have many competitors. He had a monopoly going on. So the nature of the business and the monopoly, I guess, was to just be a businessman about the thing. You know, why would he, I guess he figured out, you know, why would he just give you a whole bunch more than what you were deserving or what you earned? Now, I'm not saying I condone it or I didn't that kind of business. I'm just trying to say from a business perspective, that's the way he approached it. It didn't necessarily make him a bad guy, but for that. And then she kept making these statements about him using abrasive language or abusive language and so on and so forth. And that's all relative as well. You know, he could say it all with a smile on his face, you know, and in a foreign language, and they wouldn't even know what the hell he was talking about, necessarily. And they probably smile on back at him and so on and so forth. So, you know, all that's relative to, you know, a lot of things. A lot of people, a lot of things factor into that, whether it's abusive or not. Maybe he's just the type of person like a drill sergeant, you know. And when you go like that movie Full Metal Jacket, the guy didn't like this Snowball. What's his name? Snowball. When he named him Snowball, he just really didn't like this guy. But this guy was just doing his damn job, you know. The sergeant there, the drill sergeant, he's just doing his job. And that's just the way he was cut. You know, it could be the same way with Scrooge. So you can say that's abrasive, or could say it's demeaning or derogatory, or whatever you want to call it, abusive, and so on and so forth. Just a second. But yeah, Scrooge went through the whole gamut of all these things. So why do you say that he was this and he was that? And she said it in the way to say that as if the AI said in a way to say as if that was actually who he was. But that was only a facet. That was only part of what he was. That was only one facet of what he was, or some facets of what he was. Like I said, through the story, he went through the whole gamut of all of it, and then he ended up on something they considered to be redemption, you know. And he swayed over to the majority, and the majority, what the majority are about. I'm not necessarily going on about what's right and what's wrong necessarily, as far as the people in Ebenezer Scrooge. I'm just trying to make a case, really, for Ebenezer Scrooge, who seems to be the guy that everyone's dumping on in the story, until he is swayed to come and see things and do things like everyone else does things, and saw things and handle things and regarded things. And I really didn't appreciate the AI making Scrooge out to be just the nemesis or the bad guy, you know, that everyone dumped on. I mean, which one is the one that you think of the most, I guess, when you think of Ebenezer Scrooge? Consider the most. The one that was before he became the miser? Or the one as he was the miser? Or the one after he went, I guess, full circle, 360, and became like he was before, even so-called better, according to the story and the ways that people are looking at the story, I guess. Excuse my lack of fancy words. They're there somewhere, but I don't have that much access to them. Like they're at the tip of my fucking fingers. I have that much access to them, so I have to search for them. So sometimes I just rather just move on and just throw a bunch of words in there and get it said and get it done. If I was writing, you know, it'd be a different case. But this is my spoken language, and it's rusty as hell. Okay, having said that, that gives you a little more insight on what's missing in the text or the description of the video I put up. And what do we entitle that thing? I don't recall. I'm remiss. Gemini. Going on about a debate with Gemini or something like that. Over there in the description box. I guess there's a lot more that was said, and it was said in a much different way. But whatever it was we said and however we said it, we went on for a while. Gemini finally kind of came to try to see it my way a little bit more and stop being so, I don't know, certain that Ebenezer Scrooge was just a bad guy. Either way, from the beginning Scrooge, the Scrooge in the middle, and the Scrooge at the end. Oh, that's Anthony Terrell, by the way. I thought it was interesting. Someone else might find that to be interesting, so I'm putting it up.